Hi, it's Monday, November 10th, and we're tracking Typhoon Fung-Wong, Philippine name Uwan, as it enters the South China Sea this morning. You can see the system rotating here just west of the coast of Luzon after making a strong landfall there overnight last night, bringing strong typhoon force winds, very heavy rainfall, and significant surge along a large portion of the northern Philippines coast. Now, since that landfall, we've seen the system weaken considerably as expected. It is not nearly as strong as it was when it came inland, but the system is still likely a typhoon this morning, and we're still likely seeing some typhoon force winds brought to the west central part of Luzon. And for that reason, we've still got Signal 3 warnings and Signal 4 warnings along a large portion of the Luzon coast. But progressively today, as this core gradually moves away from the coast, we'll likely see those typhoon force winds decrease along the northern Philippines. And so conditions overall should improve. However, persistent tropical storm force winds and heavy rainfall will likely continue through most of this week as the system is now making a slow turn towards the north. And this is going to be a very long duration turn as we're expecting it to near China and Taiwan by mid to late week. So we've got several days still of outer rain bands likely rotating in, especially because of the large size of this storm. And so for the next few days of the forecast for the Philippines, unfortunately expecting just more heavy rainfall to come into, especially Luzon. And with the high terrain here, we could see additional rainfall totals of a couple hundred millimeters of rainfall on top of what we've already gotten over the past 2 days. And that could lead to more flooding issues in the northern Philippines alongside tropical storm force winds as those bands rotate in. Now, talking about the future forecast of the system for Taiwan and China, as I mentioned, the system is going to be making a slow turn towards the north throughout the course of this week. Now, the most significant impacts are likely going to be in Taiwan, even if the system's center does not ever make landfall there, as you can already see some of these thunderstorms way away from the center of the storm starting to blow up here and move towards Taiwan. And this is going to be a big issue across the island for the next several days, is as they butt up against the high terrain in the central part of the island, that's going to effectively wring out like a sponge, like a wet sponge you have. It's going to wring out the moisture in the atmosphere. So we're going to see very heavy rainfall totals on the leeward side of the mountains. On the windward side, on the western part of the island, likely not nearly as much. We may see some increased rainfall totals if the storm gets north of you all and we see the wind shift out of the west, though that will be a much drier wind comparatively to the east wind. So main flooding issues will be on the eastern coast of the island. Now, I've been alluding to that throughout the discussion of, is the system going to go to Taiwan, or is it going to sort of just move north, meander around, and just die out, stalling out here in the north-south China Sea? And we talked about yesterday how there was a significant model spread into exactly which scenario out of those two was going to come true. And one thing we need to see is, how did the system structure look after coming off toward the Philippines today? Now, what we can see is that the system's structure is overall disrupted from where it was, and you would expect it would be to some extent, though we are seeing signs that the eye wall is not fully disrupted from land interaction. As you can see across this eastern part of the eye, we still have it void of convection, likely because it is interacting with land still, but the part that has moved offshore on the western side of it, we've already seen deep convection start to fire over the center again, and so this may be a good sign for the storm, relatively speaking, and may allow it to maintain its intensity a little bit better for the next 24 hours. As if we look at the sea surface temperature map from the HAFS model, which is a high resolution hurricane model, we can see that as it comes offshore, it's moving into 27 to 28 degrees Celsius waters. Still pretty warm and favorable for the storm. And so that may allow in short term, more so over the next 24 hours, the system to maintain its intensity or maybe intensify ever so slightly. I'm a little bit skeptical of strengthening, but some models nonetheless have tried to show that occurring with the storm structure and the warm waters that we have this morning. Now, going past 24 hours, the system will likely begin to gradually weaken by that point, as one aspect of the water in the South China Sea, especially in this part, is that the warmth does not extend to a great depth beneath the surface, especially comparatively to the Philippine Sea. And so that you'll see in the next 24 hours is out to getting into Tuesday morning local time, the green starts showing up here on the model forecast. And these are much cooler sea surface temperatures, and for a tropical cyclone, they're not really favorable for a typhoon. And so that will start to cause the system to gradually weaken. But how quick is this weakening rate? That's a good question, because we do have some competing steering flows by this point in the forecast. And we can see this very clearly if we look at the HASS model again out to 24 hours. And you can see in the mid to upper levels, we've got this area of high pressure. And this has been the dominant steering feature for the past few days, and is why the system has been tracking to the west for the past few days. But now the system finds itself on the western edge of this, which is trying to push the system to the north. However, if we take a sounding, we'll see that this is not throughout the entire troposphere. And what you're paying attention to primarily on this graph is this part here, which is showing you wind direction and speed with height. And so what we'll see is that with this mid to upper level ridge, we've got that southerly flow in the mid to lower parts of the troposphere, extending from about 500 to 200 millibars in that layer of the atmosphere. And so this flow is trying to push it to the north. However, if we take a look at the surface flow in comparison, low level to surface flow, we've got more easterly to northerly flow by this point, trying to push the storm towards the southwest instead of to the north. And so the net effect of this is that we have a significant vertical shear in the atmosphere, which is by definition the difference in wind direction with height. And so we can see on the magnitude from the HASS model, it's around 20 knots here. And so that's likely to cause the system alongside the water issues at the surface to gradually weaken. But some models are differentiating on exactly how strong an effect this shear is going to have on the vortex of the storm. If the storm does gradually weaken, like we're seeing on the HASS model and what a lot of forecasts have, then that means the storm is going to stay stronger for a longer period of time. And a stronger storm is going to have thunderstorms that tower higher and higher into the atmosphere. And the storm is going to take the steering mean across the entire atmospheric column. It's not just going to take one as a strong storm. It's going to try and average all of this out. And so that you'll see if the storm is stronger by this point, which it is in the model forecast, it's going to be feeling this flow much more so than if it's a weaker system. And so that's going to cause the system to track towards the north comparatively to if it was weaker, weakening at a faster pace, then it would be moving more towards the southwest with the surface flow. And that's where models are diverging in this part of the forecast. Does it weaken gradually, and then we see the system race off to the northeast in Taiwan, in southern Japan, or does it just weaken considerably and start to slow down significantly in this part of the South China Sea, and then eventually just turn back towards the southwest, aligning with the surface flow? Now, if I had to align with one of these scenarios today, I would align more so with the scenario of it moving towards the north gradually and then turning towards the northeast, towards Taiwan and southern Japan, especially because of the structure that we're seeing offshore the Philippines this morning. And that's the current forecast from Pagasa, and really forecast agencies are aligning as well to the scenario of it tracking towards Taiwan and southern Japan. And you can see on the forecast from Pagasa, maintaining typhoon intensity for the next several days. So maintaining a gradual weakening pace, not rapidly weakening in the next couple of days. And for that reason, we see the system move into Taiwan by Thursday and then move into southern Japan by Friday and Saturday. And it will weaken more considerably as it interacts with the high terrain in Taiwan. And we could see still some tropical storm force winds brought to these islands further towards the north as the system makes that turn. Though there is, again, still some uncertainty in this. If the system does end up weakening more significantly in this part of the forecast than is shown, then we could see it just slow down. And there's a possibility it never makes it to Taiwan. Though one thing that I did mention earlier is that regardless of that, the system is still likely going to bring very heavy rainfall to Taiwan. And you can see this very clearly in the European ensemble. And this is a European ensemble approach. So this has 51 different members. So 51 different runs tweaked in a little different way to give you 51 reasonable expectations of the forecast for the next 7 days. And the average of this is showing you very heavy rainfall on that leeward side of the islands in eastern Taiwan. And those are values of 400 to 500 millimeters or more along that coast. And that, even if the system doesn't make landfall, will occur because of that onshore push from the east. And so we could see, for that reason, significant flooding regardless of track of the system. And we could still see some significant rainfall in eastern China and southern Japan. It will be less totals because we don't have nearly as much high terrain across those regions, but especially if the core does get closer to those regions, we could see elevated rainfall totals in those areas, which could lead to some localized flooding issues there. But I'll have more videos on this as it continues progressing towards the north and makes this slow turn. Stay safe in the Philippines and Taiwan as the storm impacts you for the next several days. That's all for now. Thanks for watching.